He did, he's getting there. Okay, November 20th, Planning Board meeting is now open. And we have two things on the agenda tonight. First thing is, it will be quick, because I'm sure everybody's here for Route 138. So the first thing we have is our highway superintendent is asking for $8,150, which is gonna be coming from an account that we had transferred over from formerly known as Finch Farms. And it's to install a drain pipe over on Leonard Street. And he put in some pictures to show the flooding. And the gentleman that's doing the sewer gave him a bid and said that he could get it done before winter. We do have the funds in that account that will pay for it, and we have an estimate that's inside the packet.
No restrictions on the account, or?
No.
Okay.
So all we need is a motion to release, or once the work is completed, John, once the work's completed, then we'll have, Ed will submit for payment.
Yes, I believe so.
So this is just approving that we will pay the $8,150 for the highway department, for that account.
Dan, can I make a comment on that?
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
state your name for the record, please.
Dick Shallow, 218 Hickory Drive. I think it would be a very worthwhile, economical thing for the town to do, in as much as Selco, which is the construction firm you're talking about, is in the area. I think the work can be done at a price which would be much lower than if we had sought out a separate, construction contract. So it would be opportune to do this now if we were looking for the best price deal.
Right. Okay, thank you. Ralph, any questions?
I make a motion that we agree to the release of the funds from the, whatever account it is, to the highway department as requested by our highway superintendent in his memo of November 19, 2014.
Second. Second for discussion, any discussion?
No?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That form that you had,
Sure.
we'll use that, we can use that on the next
Okay.
time around, once the funds get changed over. Okay, well, we have a full house, and thank you all for coming. This is the first time that the planning board has had a informal type meeting like this. And the reason for it is Route 138 is the one last area in the town of Raynham that future development is most likely going to happen. And it is the one area in town that has the most controversial between people wanting it to be business and people wanting it to stay the way it is. So we felt that it would be beneficial for the entire town to be aware of what's going on Route 138 and not just a handful of people on a committee. We did have, we received a grant for $10,000 that the town hired Serpide, which is, they were a part of doing this, putting together Route 138 study. And we had a committee put together, we went through, before John was here, Marilyn, who was our town planner, she headed it up. And we had about 8 meetings, I believe, maybe 6 or. And we came to a, pretty close to being completed. Marilyn retired, and we were without a town planner for about a year. And then that's when John came on board. And since then, John's been working with a new Route 138 study committee. From the first study committee to the second study committee, the members were pretty much the same, except for a couple of people wasn't able to continue doing it. So we got to a point where we were getting so far away from what we did prior to, and it was almost that the zoning that we were coming up with for improving 138 was almost existing to what 138 is now. 138 has been business zoned, residential zone. About 10, 12 years ago, our other town planner, Richard McCarthy, came up with an idea of what was called D district, to create a business environment, but not drive-up windows, not the full-blown business type, allowing that type of business, and that's in the middle section. And over the 10 years or 11 years, we had one person, and I believe that was the foot doctor, and he's no longer there. So.
It's a family practice.
Oh, family practice, I'm sorry. So hopefully this is the family practice, gentlemen. And before you shout out, or anybody else, you can raise your hand and so you can state your name for the record. So that was the only one business that came forward in that area. And we really feel the town of Raynham as a whole is really, we're pretty lucky. We're lucky to have Route 44. We're lucky to have our industrial parks, our business parks. And with 138 being the last area, we really feel that it's important that everybody is on this together and working together to make it the best for the town. So, with that said, afterwards, after John is our town planner, he's gonna give some statistics and things that he's been working on. And then after that, we'll go around the room, people that have questions. And now the nice thing is John doesn't live in Raynham, so he doesn't have, he's doing his job. And he gives us all the information that we ask for. And he's, whether it gets changed or not get changed, he's still doing his job. So I'm gonna turn it over. Before I turn it over, did you want to say something?
Sure, I would like to, if I may.
Richard Schiavo,
I would like to say.
Selectman.
Now, the first thing I'd like to say is, and I know there's a lot of pluses and minuses and a lot of pros and cons in terms of this study. What I feel is important is the focus is on Route 138 revitalization. In other words, you know, we need to take it past, it's not just zoning, it's cleaning up some of the businesses that could stand some cleaning up on Route 138. It's making it more attractive. We don't, at least from my perspective, want to see it a Route 44. I don't think that's in the mix. It certainly isn't with the people I'm working with. But I'm sorry? Yeah, what we really want to do is take it out of just the realm of zoning. That is a part of it, clearly, but it isn't the only part. And we've talked about standing back and saying, what's the bigger picture? What are the other components that are involved? I do also want to say that John, although he doesn't live here, he does work here, and that's important to him. and it's important to us. And what I like about the approach that's being taken right now is it's not just planning, but there's an economic development component to it, which is important to the town. So, while we're talking about town planning, we also want to keep in mind that our town planner also is responsible for economic development, and that's a big piece of the pie, so let's not lose perspective on that. But I think, we need to keep an open mind for everybody's interest in this issue, and certainly the residents at the final analysis are the ones that'll carry this to wherever it's going to go. So I think it's great that you're here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And just so everybody knows, we did have a sign-in sheet, and that sign-in sheet is, you're not voting for anything. We see some people going up to the podium a little nervous of signing in. That's just for us, if we're looking at this as being a long-term commitment. And if we need to forward people information, at least we'll have your name and addresses, and so that's the only reason why we're having it. It'll be kept with us anyway. All right?
And we're not trying to pick on people.
Nope.
Every time my department has a pre-application meeting with a developer and other department heads, we have a sign-in sheet for our files, so we know who is there. So it's just for record keeping, and like Dan said, in case we need to reach out to people or get in touch with people, send information, or if people want to contact us, we have a frame of reference. So Dan gave you a good background. What happened was we started reactivating the steering committee back after I started. I started in August of 2013. We started meeting again probably October 2013. And we had, again, probably 6 or 7 meetings through March or April of this year. And we got to a point where we realized that the zoning we had come up with was no different than what was already out there. And from a planning perspective, that doesn't make much sense to promote something that's not going to have any meaningful impact on the town. So one thing I realized in talking and conferring with Dan and is, well, I asked him, I said, has anyone ever spoken to the people who live on 138? And he said, no, I don't think anyone has. So I said, well, maybe we should. And so over the next few months after that, through phone calls and actually going to people's houses at different time of day because of work schedules, in the residential D district, there were approximately 35 homeowners. I spoke with 32 homeowners. The others could not be reached or were out of town and living elsewhere. What really stood out was, out of those 32, 28 homeowners I spoke with strongly supported some kind of either overlay district or zoning change for their property. That really got my attention, because not having history with the town, I had heard different people tell me about the background of work on this corridor, and that traditionally support for some kind of change was mixed at best. So when I started talking to different people and check off support, I'm like, wow, I'm not seeing this mixture. I'm seeing pretty strong support. 2 other people were on the fence. They were cautiously supportive, but wanted to see what eventually would be proposed. And there were only 2 people who said, no, I don't want to see the zoning change on Route 138. So only 2 out of 32 people I spoke with said, no, we don't want to see something change. So that got our attention. And that's when, I think Dan was a little bit surprised by that too. So that's when I want to take it to the next level and start collecting some data. And one of the first things I wanted to do, because I hear about the traffic on Route 138. Well, I heard the argument, if you change the zoning on 138, it's going to increase traffic, all that. So I had Mass DOT in September go out and put traffic counting tubes. I don't know if any of you ran over them between September 9th and 12th, those little rubber tubes. We had never had a traffic count done of the entire corridor, so they did the traffic count at 5 different locations. North of Carver Street, south of Carver Street, south of Britton Street between Britton and King Philip, south of King Philip Street, and then at the Taunton City line, to capture the entire corridor and capture the influence of the side streets like Britton Street, like King Philip, like Carver Street. And what we found was the highest volume was at north of Carver Street, and they do a 24-hour count, and they get a number that's called the ADT, average daily traffic over 24 hours. It's 23,500 cars north of Carver Street, as opposed to down at the Taunton City line where it's 19,200. So that's a 4,300 car difference. You do the math roughly, and even though we didn't do an origin destination study, that seems to indicate that about 78 to 79% of the traffic is pass-through traffic. It's not Raynham generated traffic. It's going between the highway and Taunton in some capacity, which seems to indicate to me that the traffic is already here. The traffic already exists, and that was really telling. So the other thing I noticed with counts that Serpent had done back in 2009 at specific locations, it seems as though over the past 6 or 7 years, traffic has increased by 10%. Not much has changed on 138 in 6 or 7 years. Therefore, traffic is increasing by 10% without anything happening, which means, again, traffic is going to do what it's going to do on 138. So there seems to be strong support among residents and businesses that I spoke with. And the one thing I heard from the people who want to see something happen with their property is their concern about their property values going forward. The fact that as traffic volumes increase outside of our control, there's going to be less and less interest to own a single-family home on Route 138 because it's simply too dangerous and there's too much traffic. That's what I was told by people. People are fearful that when the time comes, they're not going to be able to resell their property as a single-family home without some kind of other options available to them. So what the town does not want to see, and Mr. Shivo mentioned the economic development component, is one of the things the town doesn't want to see is vacant homes on Route 138 where people have to walk away. And now we have an eyesore, we have a property that's being unused that becomes a hindrance to economic development and potentially a public health and public safety hazard. It's not a good look for any town. However, when Mr. Shivo mentioned economic development, one of the things that, as we plan things out, there's always a balance between economic development yet preserving character and the quality of life, not just for property values on 138, but also property values for the neighborhoods abutting Route 138. So that's never not a consideration. That's always a consideration. Planning doesn't happen in a vacuum. Economic development does not happen in a vacuum. So anything that would potentially be done in the future would be sensitive to that. Absolutely. So we are, we would be concerned about protecting the quality of life for those neighborhoods for properties in and around Route 138 as well. So it's a balance between, another term I hear a lot is vested interest. Well, everyone in this room has a vested interest in Route 138. Whether you live on 138, own a business on 138, or live in a neighborhood abutting Route 138. Different vested interests, but everyone has a vested interest. People want to protect their property values. People want to protect their quality of life. So it's a balancing of those different factors. What I realized, the other thing I did was I went and collected tax information and assessment information for every single property between Route 495 and the Taunton City line. And this also surprised me. There are 104 properties that I counted, excluding vacant properties and government-owned properties, obviously, that are tax exempt. Out of the 104 properties, 53 are being used for commercial purposes right now. That's more than half. And when I mentioned that to people around Town Hall, in fact, someone came in my office today, someone who's lived in town a long time. I said, how many properties would you estimate are being used for commercial purposes in this stretch? The person answered, I don't know, 20? I said, 53. So I think people don't realize how commercial that corridor already is. And when I looked at the assessment information and the tax collection information from FY 2014, it was startling. For fiscal year 2014, the town collected in tax revenue from the 53 residential, 51 commercial, my apologies, so it's a little less than half, but about 50% between residential and commercial. Out of the 53 residential properties in FY14, the town collected just under $210,000 in tax revenue. For the 51 commercial properties, the town collected almost $1.2 million in tax revenue from those commercial properties. Hillcrest Plaza, right at the corner of King Philip Street, contributed over $55,000 in tax revenue to the town in 2014. That's a police cruiser. That's a fire truck. So there is a benefit there when development is done tastefully and the right way. So as Dan mentioned, Route 44 is what it is and has been for a long time. The character of Route 44 is not changing in the near future. However, and so a lot of the other neighborhoods, they may become denser with more residential subdivision, but the nature of most neighborhoods in Raynham aren't going to change. This is the one area that is changing and is going to change. And the other bit of research I did was I looked at the zoning on Route 138 in Taunton, and from the Raynham town line to Bay Street, Route 138 in Taunton is zoned highway business, and yet it's farther away from the highway than our stretch of 138. So there would be some consistency there if it were decided to pursue a change in zoning as well. The other aspect of looking at planning, again, not in a vacuum, is if you look at the way zoning was intended, zoning was created specifically because during the Industrial Revolution, people didn't want to live near factories because factories were very dirty. They weren't very environmentally aware back in the early 19th century. They were polluting because they didn't know any better. People didn't want to live near factories, so we established zoning districts to keep certain uses away from other uses. However, as our country deindustrializes, if you will, factories are being converted into housing, converted into retail. Our economy is changing to more of a service, tech, clean economy. There's not that need for separation anymore. You're seeing uses combine and consolidate. Mixed use is where zoning is going. I mean, you go into any Walmart, you have a Subway, you have a bank inside the same store. So that's the other thing in looking to the future. And we're not looking 2 years, 5 years into the future. We're talking 20, 30 years down the line, because if zoning changes, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to happen very gradually. And I think what people may not be aware of is even within the business zones in our town, single-family homes are an allowed use by right. And approximately 50% of the land use within the business zones are still single-family residences. So a zoning change wouldn't mean you couldn't have a single-family home. You still could have a single-family home. So where do we go from here? What we're trying to determine through this workshop and as we go forward is, what is the desire of a town as a whole? As Dan mentioned, not just a small group of 5 or 6 people here or there. We're trying to get people together to find out what is the will of the town, and that's part of my job as the planner. Not to drag the town kicking and screaming in a direction it doesn't want to go. My job is to help guide the town in the way it wants to go. So if the residents speak and say, yes, we want to pursue some kind of zoning change, whether it's a strict rezoning with an overlay district, or some combination of both, or whatever, then that's what I'll do, and I think the planning board would most likely support that. What happens if we do nothing? As I said, my belief is in my career and other towns I live in, eventually interest in owning a single-family home in Raynham on 138 probably would diminish over time. In other words, if we do nothing, then we leave it up to chance and we leave it up to fate, especially with the potential of the commuter rail coming in. I spoke to the city planner in Taunton a couple weeks ago, let him know about this workshop, and asked him if he'd be willing to attend, and he said, no, I think I'll stay out of that because, he goes, I don't want to appear to have a conflict of interest or to be stepping on the town's toes. In addition, he said, I want to stay out of it because, to be honest with you, if CVS wants to move out of that Market Basket Plaza and the zoning on 138 isn't appropriate for them to stay on Route 138 in Raynham, Taunton would open the welcome mat for them. That's the other thing, is CVS is a long-standing business where people fill their prescriptions. There's a chance that they could want to build outside of that plaza, may not have the capability to do that within Raynham, and they may go over the line to Taunton. So that's services lost, potential tax revenue loss. So those are some of the possible consequences. And the question is, again, is there support among the town, the civic leaders, to pursue some kind of zoning change? As Dan said, tends to be one of the more polarizing topics in town. That's another thing we need to determine. Again, any zoning changes would not yield immediate impacts. It would be very gradual. And the other thing, mentioned Route 44. I agree with Mr. Shivo that Route 138 could never become Route 44. You simply don't have the width of the layout. The proximity of the residential neighborhoods right behind properties that front on 138 would be prohibitive. And also, you simply don't have the lot sizes and the frontage. I mean, you look at a lot of the lots on Route 44, hundreds of feet of frontage with 10, 20, 30 acres of land. You don't have that in that middle section of Route 138. You have maybe 2, 3 acres tops, some of the biggest parcels there. So the lot sizes, if something were done, would definitely have an impact on what type of development would happen in the future. Is it possible that people could combine their properties and sell it to a developer? Yes, but they can do that now. The only difference is if it's still zoned residential, people could potentially get together, sell their properties, combine them through an approval not required plan, and put a Chapter 40B affordable housing development right on Route 138. Is that what the town really wants on Route 138? So, the best option, again, depends on the will of the town. The best option may be a simple rezoning. I believe it's either an overlay district or a rezoning with some changes to our bylaws, because Route 138 is unique. It's not Route 44. It never will be Route 44. So whatever zoning change, whatever development happens in the future, there would be certain uses most likely that the residents wouldn't want to see on 138. Wouldn't want to see more big box retail. Wouldn't want to see certain types of drive-through facilities that would be a nuisance to the abutting neighborhoods. So these are things that we'd have to work through to create something that would be unique to Route 138, because it is a unique corridor. It's a challenging corridor. But again, as a planner, I don't think it's wise to just put this on the back burner and just leave the future of 138 up to whatever happens. The other thing is, I haven't talked to many people who are very happy about the overall look of 138 and the businesses on 138. You have some nice properties. You have some eyesore properties, which Mr. Shivo said we're starting to address. And wouldn't change overnight, but if these properties changed hands, some of the ones that don't look so nice, if they changed hands and came in for an improvement site plan review, the planning board could have them live up to any design standards that we implement. So we're looking futuristic, certainly most likely beyond my time that I'm employed by the town. But this is something for the long-term future of the town in Route 138. And certainly I've gotten this question: well, if we did a rezoning, if my property were rezoned, how would it affect my taxes? It wouldn't. Unless it's a vacant parcel, properties are assessed on use and not the zoning of it. But it's the same thing if you own a single-family home. If you put an addition on, if you start a home business, if you build a garage, your taxes change because you made a physical improvement to the property. But as long as a single-family home remains a single-family home, your taxes would not change. Unless you were to convert it to something commercial, yes, then your taxes would change. Okay?
Very good.
Any of the members of the board have?
Say something.
Oh, wait a minute, please. I'll get to you. Sorry. Yes, Brooke.
I have a question. You talked about commuter rail. Are there any estimates as to how much traffic it would add if there was a commuter rail station put in at the dog track?
I would have to go back and look at the reports on that. I'm not sure off the top of my head, Burke. I haven't looked at that in a little while.
Question?
Yes, Henry.
I look at Route 138 somewhat similar to Route 44, Winthrop Street going east to East Providence. There's a lot of residential there. It's been there for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. You don't see empty houses there. What is that zone? Do you know?
I do not.
guess
Oh, wait a
it's
sec.
highway business.
Actually, I believe if this is the Taunton zoning map, so is this Route 44 right here?
I think he's talking on Winthrop Street heading to Rehoboth side.
Yeah, heading
Yeah, right
towards
here.
Rehoboth.
I think
and
that would be it right there. It
Providence.
looks like it might be highway business. I believe that's Route 44 right there.
Correct.
So I think you may be right.
My guess is highway.
Is that
business.
Route 44 right there, Dan?
Yeah.
Yeah. Highway business, yes.
Not a question, but could you repeat the figures in terms of the traffic? How much of it
Sure.
goes out right now?
Actually, I can give you exactly what the numbers were for each station. Yeah.
That's what you said before.
Okay. Station 1 was north of Carver Street between,
Excuse
Car-
me,
yes.
before you speak, give us your name and address.
John Texera, 122 First Street, I know better, I'm sorry.
Station 1 was...
Speak here often.
Station 1 was north of Carver Street, and that was 23,500. Station 2 was just south of Carver Street, and that was 21,200. Station 3, which was south of Britton Street, was 18,300. Station 4, which was south of King Philip, was 19,800. And then Station 5 at the Taunton City line was 19,200. So very similar between those two. That was the least amount of difference.
Okay, so we're gonna put it out on the floor for questions. And you had your hand up. Yes, sir. State your name for the record.
Plan 15,
Name and
20
address,
years from
please,
now.
sir.
Could you state your name for the record?
Yeah, William Barrett. I live at 390 Broadway.
Thank you.
You're talking about changing the zoning 15, 20 years from now. Most of us aren't gonna be here 15, 20 years from now. And if we are, we're quite old. So if you're gonna make changes, and these people are all for it, you should set something up that's gonna be a little sooner, so they can sell the properties if that's what you're gonna do.
Well, I think what John mentioned is we're not looking to make changes to the zoning 15, 20 years from
Right.
now. We're looking to come up with a consensus and try to figure out something now, and it's gonna take 15 to 20 years for things to happen. It's not gonna happen overnight that you're gonna see change, but if we don't start planning today, then we will be behind, and then you may start getting some development coming in on 138 that has the right to build, but it might not fit into the scope of what we want the corridor of 138 to look like. The one thing I forgot to mention too, prior to, with Route 138 being business, residential, what confused matters even more, when Walmart was coming, slated to come in, they were buying the driving range. The petition went around to change that zoning, to try to block Walmart. So the zoning got changed from King Philip Street to the Taunton line, to a business development district. So now we have a business development district that, according to Serpent's study that we did, that entire area has 1% of that business development. So the reason for the change wasn't to try to help or assist the future of 138, it was to try to block something else from coming in. And it just didn't work. Walmart was able to go forward with a Form A plan, protect their zoning, and then they were locked in for however long. So to have things being, now we have multiple zones, multiple business type on 138, and it is, there's a gentleman I see, Bob, he has a piece of property on 138 he purchased, and from what I was told, half of his piece of property was in, Bob, maybe you can help me. Part of your property is in Taunton, and the other part is in the Business Development District?
Name and address, please.
Yeah, and could you state your name?
It's Robert Powell, 38 Broadway. I purchased the building. Half the building is in the building and the land, most of the land is in Raynham. I have like a couple acres in Pine, but I'm not allowed to use like my land in Taunton because I'm so limited with what I can use my property for. And I'm trying to spend money to clean it up, because I've done a little bit of work to it, because it did look terrible, but I'm not allowed to like use it for what I want to make it, make any money, to make improvements on the property. I'm just so limited because of that ruling, because of Walmart.
So, and again, that's the very first piece of property when you enter the town of Raynham. That's the first piece of property that you see.
On the right?
So,
Then on the right?
on the left-hand side.
Behind
Coming
me,
in.
House of Pizza.
So that's, that is one concern. You have somebody that lives in the town who purchased a piece of property in town, who wants to make improvements on it, but because of the zoning that it currently is, which was changed, that piece of property was always business. He's finding it hard going through the building permit process. So, I just wanted to bring that up. Yes, state your name for the record.
Lorraine Nicholson, 36 First Street. I just wanted to say, in regards to this subject, that only the side of Walmart is on the business development. Our side, the other side is still residential D.
Yes.
Only one side of it.
which-
Business development.
Correct.
Well, I just want everybody in the room to know that.
Which makes it even harder because somebody over here,
Down to the top line, that wasn't correct.
Let's speak up the mic.
You said from King Philip Street down to the top line, 138 is business development because of Walmart, but only on that side, not on the other.
on the side that Walmart is, was the piece that was changed to business development, which is even worse. Because now you have residential on one side of the street, business development on the other side of the street, business up further. It's just quite a,
Can I add to that?
yep, go ahead.
On the topic of that designated development, that designated development district is really out of place in that location. Designated development was intended, designated development is the zoning where Paramount Drive is and the Commerce Park. The intention of the designated development district is to encourage commerce. Businesses like Johnson & Johnson, Amica Insurance, FedEx, on large lots that employ a lot of people, that have large buildings, large companies. So really, when you look at that end of 138, really designated development is really out of place in that area. It really, and now it really hinders the town. If the town wants to make a zoning change at one section that's zone designated development over at Paramount Drive, it has to make that same zoning change at that designated development on Route 138, where it really doesn't belong. So I think that's another thing that should be looked at in the future is zoning that more appropriately, because designated development is for lots 15 acres or larger and all that stuff. So I think that's something that needs to be looked at, because state law states that when you have like business district here in one part of town, business district there, if you make a change to your zoning bylaws for your business district, it has to apply to everywhere in that town that's zoned that designation equally. So it really is, it really makes it kind of complicated for the town to do things with that designated development district.
Okay, questions? Yes, sir.
Jim Trump, 416 Broadway. Earlier you mentioned that I was the only one who actually got a permit to do a business there. And if I had known what had happened over these past 10 years, I would not have done it. But I fell in love with what Mr. Bayer did with his house, so I headlong but foolishly purchased a place and went through a lot of loops to convert into a business, which is a medical practice. Over the years, first of all, I intend to live there first, but then shortly after I moved my practice and my residence there, I decided that it wasn't a good place to live, because as a physician, I know that living by a busy highway with all this exhaust from cars and noises, my lifespan would be shortened for sure. And so I actually, I'm just talking to you.
Everyone's gonna feel great.
I'm glad you came. I'm glad you came.
All right, let's
But then-
keep it civil.
But then, so personally, I mean, that's that's my personal view about living there, and especially recognizing that the traffic was not going to get better at all. Second of all, business-wise, even though you mentioned that with a special permit I was able to do business, there was a limit on how much square footage I could use for the business. It's 2,000 square foot, and over the years I thought very hard about hiring and actually inviting other physicians to join me. But then if you are my patient, I see some of the cases here, you know that I only have one exam room. No other physician in their right mind would have one exam for his office. usually a primary care doctor has at least 2 or 3 offices, basically, to see their patient to make it financially profitable. And I really did what I did because I did it out of love. Unfortunately, I had to close my practice because I was not able to really continue doing it because of other personal demands, as well as the fact that I was not able to have other people actually help me covering for me in that way. And I had to attend to that personal business. So basically, that's what you have from the personal perspective and the perspective of business. And besides, since I moved my practice there, I was always taxed as a commercial property, even though I don't have a freedom of what a commercial property can really do.
Very good, thank you. Go ahead.
That gentleman referenced the traffic. I've heard nothing but positive comments about the traffic mitigation that came out of the Walmart project. So when we hear concerns about future development on Route 138, well, that development seemed to have made things a lot better on Route 138. I got my hair cut today at the Two Sons Barbershop, and she said she can't wait for the Center Street lights to go in because then cars will slow down and stop right in front of her business, and that's going to help her business. So as much as there's some misgivings about potential future development on 138, that's a development where when a new business comes in, the mitigation that they're required to do can actually make things better.
Yeah, and I'd like to add, and I'll take you next, but I'd like to add something. The first time we had a study committee, we were in the process of Walmart going in, and we knew that we had 3 sets of lights going in. So we were not sure of the impact and the positive impact or negative impact that those lights were going to have. And I think that was one thing that we were discussing back and forth. It's kind of how can we suggest things when we're really not sure what's going to happen? How much improvement will these lights do? So that was another reason for us waiting a little bit to move to the next step. And like John said, I think John spoke to the police chief.
Yes, and the biggest difference people have mentioned to me is at the King Phillip Street intersection. Even though it's not perfect, I've gone through that intersection a lot, coming down Britton Street and then coming down King Phillip Street. It's still geometrically misaligned a little bit, but from what I understand, it's a lot safer than it used to be, and the light has made a big, and the police chief verified that. Although he doesn't have any raw numbers, he said that he believes that the intersection is safer.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Janelle Hill, 68 Britton Circle. I do agree about the light. The light has been great. I can get across Route 138 now, but the truck traffic has increased. I hear it in my backyard. That's what you hear is trucks, and that's what I don't want to hear more of on 138. While I find the medical practice aesthetically pleasing on 138, that's right behind us, I wouldn't like to see a CVS there.
Very good, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Sylvia Cross, 59 Chickering Road. My question is, are you just talking about property on Broadway and not coming back into the neighborhoods by a certain amount of feet? Because some of the properties on our side of Broadway are very narrow. And are you then going to try to zone up into all of these streets in order to be able to have room to build something larger?
Well, when the steering committee, when we did this original study, they basically had taken so many feet off of Route 138. And that became a problem. I can remember when years ago, they would do that because it makes the warrant that goes in the town easy. You run a straight line 200 feet, 400 feet off of the road, and it's a lot more difficult to follow all the property lines. But we suggested, after several times we met, stick with 138, properties that front 138. If it's a small piece of property, then it's a small piece of property. They're going to be very limited on what they can do. I mentioned to John the other day that there are going to be pieces of property that I was on Route 3A, and the piece of property was about 50 feet in depth, and then it looked like it dropped down. And you would say, what would you put there? Walpole Woodworkers had a fence display with a small little shed outhouse type thing that was their office, I guess, and it looked very nice. I mean, it really did. It was a lot better than looking at I have to stop talking. So a lot of the size of the lots are gonna regulate what can actually be built there. But that is something that we, at the end, still, I feel very strongly that it should stay with the properties on 138 and not go back. Because if we take a certain footage off of 138, then a lot of these cases, the first two houses on that street would be business. And that's not what it's designed for.
Dan, can I add to that?
Go
Quickly.
ahead.
As a planner, I don't like split zoned lots. I don't like doing that 200 feet off the center line, just drawing a line. It may be easier going to town meeting with a description, but it creates more headaches down the road, like Dan mentioned, where you may have a small lot. Yes, it's true that there may be some deeper lots where it cuts the lot in half, but there are going to be just as many small lots in this area where it not only incorporates that lot, but a part of the lot behind it. And so by split zoning, in some instances, you can actually encroach more into residential areas that you don't want to. So, as Dan said, I fully support doing the lots that front on 138. It just makes things a lot simpler in the long run.
John, you had your hand up?
Well, I think number one, I'd like to address those comments you guys just made, and then I have some, I guess I'd like to offer my opinion on the subject in general. The concern with the small lots on 138, yeah, they're too small in of themselves to support a business of any type. However, the fear is that someone will do just what you talked about earlier, buy the lots behind it as people grow old and move out and so forth, and now you have a bigger lot, you have a big development. 3 years ago, there was an article produced on the last day that you could produce articles at a town meeting that would rezone King Philip and First Street and that whole stretch of Broadway as business. It went back almost as far as your property on First Street and into Chickering Road, as a matter of fact. That's the type of thing that we don't want to see happen, because that infringes on the neighborhoods. Okay, that puts a business right in our backyard, right in our front yard as well, as a matter of fact, to some of the people. That's what we're afraid of with, you know, it's nice to say it would just be the lots on 138, but it wouldn't be if that would be, and you mentioned earlier that was possible to do that.
What's that?
To get a lot behind.
No.
Well, then
I didn't say
misheard you.
lots
I apologize
I didn't
then.
say lots behind. I said lots along Route 138. 2 or 3 lots along Route 138.
Well, then I
would go
ask
by.
you the question, would lots behind 138 be
No.
prohibited
Yes,
from being bought up and
because if
included
they're
in that?
residential and we're only zoning the lots on 138 that front on 138, you'd have a business-owned lot, then the lot behind it would be residential, so you can't put a business on there. The zoning would prohibit it. No, there's no way around that. The zoning wouldn't allow it.
Even if the person wanted to buy the lot behind him and it was residential, he would have to meet the zoning requirements as business for the setbacks, for screening, for everything else. Even if he owned that, he would still have.
Make it one lot?
Yeah.
It could be one lot, but there's a line where the business is. He would have to have screening. He just wouldn't be able to do it. Yes, Burke.
We have that now with zoning that went into effect 50 years ago or whatever, where it's 200 feet back. If you have a lot that goes more than 200 feet back, you can only put business on the first 200 feet. Yeah, so we've always had that.
Let me explain to you why, John, because I see your point. I understand your point. The way the description would be written for a zoning article, it wouldn't be as simple as just the properties that front on 138. It would have to be a meets and bounds description that says, starting at this point, traveling northeasterly, blah, 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 blah. So the description would physically describe following those property lines. So if someone combined 2 lots that were zoned differently, that wouldn't change the zoning for that entire lot, because that meets and bounds description would not incorporate that new property line.
Okay, well, thank you for that.
Yes.
You didn't catch me that time.
Yes.
I'm sorry, John, did you have another comment to make
Well,
after that?
I wanted to make some comments in general, if I could,
Oh,
unless
yeah.
you want to go to some other
No,
people.
go ahead.
No,
Make some.
Okay, a few things. Traffic, John, you brought up traffic as not really increasing significantly over the past 10, 15 years. You said, I think what you said, it went up 10%?
No, I said it's increased 10%.
Yeah, but I thought you said it
Past
was.
6 or 7 years. That's when the last
Okay.
counts were done.
Well, and I submit to you that that's because not a lot has changed over the past 6 or 7 years in terms of, zoning hasn't changed at all there, okay? sorry, is somebody whistling to me, or? Oh. And my worry is, if you do change the zoning to business, other than the types we're talking about, then traffic would increase, because there's a reason to go there now, as opposed to just passing through. People would deliberately come there that don't come there now for some type of business that's there. I submit that to you. You can agree or disagree with it, just hear it as it is.
And that's a
number one.
possibility. Nobody has a crystal ball.
Exactly. As far as, and I was surprised when you told me about the 32 people out of the 36 who were in favor of that. And if any of those 32 are here, I please jump in and correct me. But I would guess that the main reason for wanting it changed is it would increase your property value. If your property was now zoned a business, then it might be someone who could pay a higher price than what you could get now as a residential.
Can I pop in? You invited me to
What?
pop in.
No, just raise your hand and I'll get to you, yep.
Okay.
Okay, but I submit to you that if your neighbor wasn't of that mind, or was of that mind to sell it as business, to allow a business to go in there, and you weren't, would you want a big business right next to you?
Don't answer that. You can,
Okay.
you can answer it when you address.
Exactly, I understand, okay. And John, to your point of the 51% that produces the $1.2 million, that's a great argument. You know, it does produce a lot more income, but would you suggest that we change all the zoning in town to commercial, and we'd get a whole lot more money than we get right now,
No.
right?
No.
Okay. The last item I guess I'd like to mention is the emphasis seems to be here on economic development. You know, we want to get businesses in there and so forth. It gives the impression that there are people out there pounding on the doors. We want to put a business out there on 138. There are lots on 138 now with signs that say land for lease, land for sale, that you could put a business on. I don't see them selling. I've been in my location for 30 years. I haven't seen anything go in there other than the Walmart and the Market Basket. And that's outside of the zone I'm talking about. Okay, bottom line to me, maybe some changes ought to be made to 138, but my particular interest, okay, is from the area just past or right next to the car lot that's across from Market Basket, north up to maybe I think there's 2 or 3 houses after Britton Street on the right-hand side that are residential homes, and I apologize if I use the reference as Britton Street. But that's an area that's primarily, and there are some businesses, I grant you, there's a restaurant, the never changing restaurant is there, and the gas station is there as well. But for the most part, they're residential, and that's the area I'd like to see protected. Residential D is not a problem in there. If you put another doctor's office, or you put a hairdresser's and so forth, that's not a big deal. I'm worried about other types of business that could go in there that would make life miserable, because you know yourself, every time there's a cut in that sidewalk, it's traffic. That's someone making a left turn or someone making a right turn. Okay, and I know I cry this story all the time, but try and get out of my street in the morning when people want to make the left turn into the Dunkin' Donuts that are coming north on 138. Okay, try and get out of my street, okay? They back up 3 and 4 deep, and you're not going anywhere till after 9 o'clock when the traffic eases up. So for whatever it's worth, that's my opinion.
Very good, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Kathleen Kenny, 301 Broadway. I forgot how you worded it. You said that, could you correct me? I think it's John?
Yes.
You said something about wanting to sell your properties at a higher value.
Yes.
The last town planner, her name was Marilyn, right?
Yes.
Okay. She said in a meeting that there were studies that in other communities where this happened, where they left residential properties surrounded by businesses, the residential properties declined in value no matter what was done. I don't want to make $1 million on my property. I want to be able to sell it. I really don't even want to put anything into my property now because it's declining in value. Nobody's going to want to buy it as a residential home. So what you're saying about an eyesore is, I'm doing construction on my house right now, and I say, do I want to spend that money? Because no, I don't want to fix it up because I'm not going to get it back because of in that thing. So it's not a matter of wanting to sell my business for $1 million and not, I don't want to encroach on the neighborhood behind me. I want it to be something, he talked about the art when, the one that came before the board where they took the big chunk and everything. Even though it would have helped me, I spoke against it because I thought it was unfair to go back into the neighborhoods like that. But I hope the two neighborhoods can work together and come to some agreement that helps both of us. that we both believe. That's all I'm asking.
Very good, thank you. And the other big important thing to, I think, for everybody to remember too, Route 138 is a mass highway. So you have a residential piece of property and you're on Mass Highway, who plows it, maintains it. Anytime that they come in front of the town, we have control over the screening of it, the parking, everything that's on that piece of property. The planning board, Board of Appeals, the town has the say on approvals on that. The entrances and exits off of Route 138 has to go through Mass Highway, and that's the Mass Highway. They do their studies and their engineers, and they do whatever they do, and that gets approved through them. It comes to us already situated, the location. We have no say, or we can put our input in, and we can say, well, we think that's too close to that intersection, or we think that's too close to the next driveway. Send it back to Mass Highway. We want somebody to comment on that. Can it be moved? And sometimes we get responses, other times they say that it is what it is, and that's, you have to live with it.
But that's part of looking at the zoning of 138. I think, John, you mentioned the extra curb cuts and the extra turning movements. And that's why any zoning change, if it's explored, would be sensitive to that. Dick mentioned not just rezoning 138, but revitalizing 138, trying to give it more of a village feel. In other words, maybe allowing the buildings to come a little close to the street and put the parking in the back, to not have those constant turning movements going on and off with these open parking areas with a strip plaza pushed back where you can just come in and out. Those are the types of things that can make driving on 138 hazardous. Some of the angles, and so that's one of the aspects that would be looked at is traffic circulation, and how do we encourage shared access between businesses off of 138 so you can get from one business to the other without having to go back out on 138. And again, long term, because you've got restrictions with the railroad right of way, behind some of the properties and things in the residential areas. So those are different aspects that would definitely be taken into consideration. I remember the steering committee had a discussion on drive-through facilities, and I remember during my time at Serpent in transportation planning, there's a hierarchy of drive-through facilities. Dunkin' Donuts, Taco Bell, Honeydew, those are the worst because they have very little indoor seating, require very little parking, therefore can go on these little postage stamps, but yet 90% of their business is all drive-through, which is impossible to plan for or predict, and they're out open till early in the morning till late at night, multiple peak periods. Then you've got your McDonald's and your Burger King who go on larger lots because they do have more indoor seating. Then you have the banks and pharmacies. When's the last time you've ever seen more than 2 cars queued up at an ATM at a bank? So that's one aspect where we don't want to create something that's one size fits all. We would want to create something that works for Route 138. So if we decide, you know what, this type of drive-through facility is okay, that type of drive-through facility is not okay. That's exactly the type of thing we'd be looking at.
And I'll get to Lorraine. I just want to add one thing to that. When John just mentioned, that's what we're trying to create, or would like to create on 138. If 138 gets changed to business, just like the rest of the business in town, we would be limited to the rules and regs, setback requirements. Everything that is good on Route 44 would be good on Route 138. In the study that Serpent was part of, they suggested doing what's called an overlay district. That would protect more residents on Chickering Road, on streets, Britain Circle, because in those areas, you could have a different criteria for setbacks, for screening, for dumpster locations. You can create your independent rules and regs in zoning for certain sections. And in this study that was done, they originally came up with 3 different zones. And they took into consideration the middle area where it was all residential. There was lighter things allowed. barber, I think there was doctor's
things
office,
like
no drive-ups,
Right.
no restaurants, so, no 24 hours. So there was, and that would be, again, the reason why we're looking at 138. What is going to be the best? So we don't have what you mentioned earlier. Anybody can come in with a zoning change. And you could be running to town hall, the town meeting, to get enough people to deny something if people keep stepping forward and putting their own zoning change in. If we do this together, and we do this as what we do as a planning board and selectmen and get the town involved, we can come up with our own overlay district, and that's what's gonna go there.
And we could even call it the Route 138 zoning district. If we could name it anything we wanted to, and we could craft dimensional regulations and use regulations that work for that roadway.
So that's just to throw that out there, and before I get to Brooke, Lorraine, you had your hand up.
That's what I was gonna say. I was gonna ask about the 24 hours and the drive-up limits. But I have to say, do you have the right to discriminate against, like if we did allow banks and pharmacies, but not, restaurants? Can you do that legally?
Yes.
In this overlay district, we can define from this street to this street, or this property line to this property line, these are the rules and regs that you have to follow.
So drive-up, I'm just saying, so you could say if you wanted to, no drive-ups only for pharmacies and banks.
Absolutely.
No 24-hour businesses.
Right.
And that type of
Or
thing.
we could.
And again, that could be determined, if it's, if you are up at Ryan Iron, way up on the other end, I think in this study, they had that as zone,
Lighting, parking lot lighting, all that would be addressed.
all different. See, right now, business on Route 138 is just like business that's on Route 44. And I think that's the concern everybody has. We're gonna have business on 138.
I just wanted to say what she brought up to lighting, because lighting pollution is a big issue. I mean, that's something, once you put in parking lots behind, the neighborhoods behind are gonna have big spotlights that light up those parking lots. And right now, our backyards are nice and dark at night, but they're gonna be lit up.
Very good. Burke, you had a question.
I don't have a question, but in case there are some people out there who have no idea what the circuit is that we're talking about, I thought John might be willing to explain it for us. Then maybe not.
John and Henry are on
You
the-
get his attention. Waiting on you, John.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Serpent,
I was in-
Serpent.
They're the regional planning agency located on Broadway. Massachusetts has 11 regional planning agencies, and Serpent is one of them. And the town pays a dues into to be a member of the Serpent region, and they provide us with technical support. They did this study for us. We can apply for grants through them. When we were doing the registered marijuana dispensary overlay district, they helped us with the maps for presentations and things of that nature. And I worked there for a while in the transportation department, and we're part of that area. And their area extends all the way from North Attleboro, Plainville, all the way down the Rhode Island line, Seacock, Swansea, all along the south shore to Fall River, New Bedford, and everywhere in between. So,
And we have one member of the planning board, that is on the Serpent committee, which is Russell.
Yep.
And then the selectmen, I believe, appoint a member of to be representing the selectmen on Serpent. So there is people from the town of Raynham representing the town of Raynham and listening to what's going on statewide. Yes, sir, you had your hand?
Yeah. I don't know, 111 First Street. He mentioned he made a study on Broadway, and he got a lot of people that were for it. He never made a study on First Street, on Chickwin Road.
Well, I think what John did was, for years, Route 138 talking about whether zoning be changed to business or not. Nobody actually went out and spoke to the residents on 138 itself. It's not that he was going to Chickwin Road or off Britton Street. He wasn't going off the side routes. It was just the actual people that live, who lives on Route 138. So people that are on 138 never had somebody knock at their door and say, what do you, how do you feel living here? And,
They never knocked on my door either. I've been
well, you don't live on one,
50 years.
you live on a road that's owned by the town of Raynham and not the highway.
Because the houses on Broadway, they're willing to sell because they can get good money probably. But the houses in the back, nobody wants those. So we're stuck with it. That's all.
And believe me, I had to convince people I wasn't a salesman.
We have a gentleman right behind, yes, sir. You.
Tony Macedo.
You are, sir.
Camden Court. I think that a lot of this will be self-regulated all on its own anyway, because any big box store or any large corporate structure, they're looking for absolute minimum. As a matter of fact, 2 acres isn't even enough nowadays. They're looking for 3 and 4 acres. I know a guy who's got 2 acres of land way up at the other end of Raynham, over by the Hess gas station, and he couldn't get anybody to take his property because they're looking for 3 acres to 4 acres. And he's got a big conglomerate out of Boston trying to sell the property. Now, I'm looking at my property, as a lot of you people know who I am. I own actually 3 lots on 138. I own the lots for the travel agency and an insurance company, and there's an empty lot alongside of it. And even with that gives me about 2 acres of land, and even with that, with 300 feet on the road, I'm not getting any bites because I put it out there just for the hell of it to see whether or not it would be worth it. And to go with this time and to wait later on. I'm not really in that overlay district program. I'm north of Britain, so it's not a big problem. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to allay some of the fears that people have about big stores coming in and going crazy and all this, because it's not going to happen. The corridor itself, no matter what, just does not lend itself or is conducive to that type of operation, because the lots are small. They're too small to, all these companies that come in, 90% of them, they want 3 acre lots, or minimum 2.5 acre lots, or even larger. So I guess a lot of the fears that are here, I'm just trying to sort of help people get comfortable. Some of the fears that we're concerned with here probably will never really come to pass, because you're not going to get big operations. You'll get, stuff like the doctor's office and barber shops, or even another insurance agency, whatever. It's just the idea that I can't see that really happening because of the properties that go along the street are too shallow, number one. Number two, they're not big enough. And number three, even if you put a half a dozen of them together, like you mentioned earlier, they would have to be stripped to the front as opposed to going deep.
They couldn't go deep, they could go across.
No, because you've got the footage rule, okay? So I'm just trying to throw some information out there to help people, because this is what I've looked at, I've seen, and I've encountered, and I've been through. I just don't think that the road itself is conducive to big business, if you want to call it that.
Yes.
I just wanted to respond to what Tony said. I was really, when B&D Construction first came to my office and to the building commissioner's office to talk about locating at the former Dyer Oil property, I think that's a good example of the type of business that we want to see on Route 138. And the level of support that they received really was surprising. There was not one person that called my office, came to my office, came to the planning board meeting. In fact, neighbors came out to support the location of Dyer Oil and the rezoning of the rear half of that property. And so that was really, and when he came forward, knowing that we were, having discussions about Route 138 in general, I remember talking to Dan at a planning board meeting and saying, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Dyer Oil and what kind of support they get. My God, I mean, people were rolling out the red carpet for them, and that was a really, really good thing to see, because I think they're a very reputable business. The building commissioner says that they're doing an excellent job out there. They're maintaining the character of that house. They're not changing the character of the site. They're very sensitive to the topography of the site. And I think they're doing something that, by and large, the community is very happy with and proud of.
Yes.
So are you saying that from 138 one thirty-eight, you're talking 200 feet and not 500 feet? Because before the committee thought 500 feet.
No, right now, we're not talking anything. If it was to go forward, if there's any overlay district that would go forward, it would be properties fronting Route 138, period.
That's it.
It's not gonna go 200, it's not gonna go, it's not gonna go a standard, just, right, because then, like, the lady on Chickering Road was saying, and that was the biggest problem. Every street, the first two houses were gonna be business, so now you're gonna have people getting in and off of 138 to go to those houses, and who knows what kind of business would go there. But that's not, that wouldn't be part of an overlay district. Yes, sir.
Forest Street, actually own, like, I just wanted to piggyback in on what Tony said. I own MB Cabinetry further up, and I can honestly say, when we bought the property, we have a butters to, if you look at our building, to our left-hand side. The screening process that you have to go through with the planning board to make sure that all the abutters are taken care of. We had to go through a certain lighting scheme. We had to put together, the parking lot had to be designed in a certain way. And if you look and you see our building, we have a big long windrow of trees that are dividing so that that gentleman to our left-hand side, there's no problems there whatsoever. Our neighbors across the street, there's a residential house across the street. All of these, everybody had an opportunity to come when we were in the discussion with the planning board for the design of the property. And I think it's a nice marriage because it had to be sodded out front, it had sprinkler systems, it had everything to it. And it took a piece of property that was just sitting there idle and barren and turned it into a very nice piece of property. We actually got an award for the landscaping design from the town of Raynham. And it was all due to the planning board and their diligence in making sure that what was going in there was, equal to or better than what was already there.
Thank you. And just to comment one additional thing on that, we do have design standards. So the planning board, when somebody submits a plan to the planning board, they can't give us a building that has no windows. That's one of our standards. They can't just build these boxes along, business areas. There's colors. We're not as enforcing like down the Cape, the conservation type or historical districts. But we do have and ask them for colors. The lighting is something that is definite. They have to provide a plan with no spillage outside of their lot line. And if there is any spillage, they can present to us their information. If it's wrong, and you as an abutter or a neighbor says, I'm getting half my backyard's lit up. It happened on Hess Gas. They were getting spillage over. We had them, even after they had their occupancy permit, they had to go back and put shields on all of their lights because the information that they gave us, something wasn't right. So we made them go back, and I think it took probably 6 months for them to keep getting lower and lower shields put onto the lights. So the meter, which one of the members that was on the board was the light expert, he would go literally and stand on the property line. If his meter showed anything, then it would be flunked. So there are a lot of design standards that would come into play and do come into play on anything that comes in front of us. And that's why we're almost thinking that an overlay district would work even better, because now we can change those design standards for the middle section of where the majority of residences are. The further section closer to 495 in the section that's closest to Taunton. So that's just, that just gives you an idea of that. Yes?
John Williams, 283 Broadway. I would like to make 2 points that I think are important over the fact that a lot of people are using the term business and commercial, and somehow they have a specific image in their heads. I want to go back to what John said earlier, that businesses as a concept is changing. There are green businesses. There are so many things that can happen on 138 of businesses that we wouldn't even know there are businesses there. There are software and programming businesses that would love to have access to 138 and avoid the high cost of Boston and Reading. Businesses that will actually contribute to the town, to the kids in the high schools, to show and give free lessons on things of that nature that will actually not only benefit the tax level of the town, but also benefit the town itself, the people. So I would like to bring to the floor the fact that when we're talking businesses, let's not think the old-fashioned way. You gotta have a CVS or Market Basket to consider a business. There are other things. Business can have 10, 15 people that can produce tremendous amount of work in a very, relatively speaking, small environment. And those businesses can help each other as well as the community without actually creating a monster of 138. Number one. Number two, and most importantly, do not actually create problems to the neighborhoods. And I would like, as a second point, to mention also that indeed there was a committee that tried for quite some time to come to some sort of understanding and resolution, or perhaps to provide some ideas. The fact that that committee existed and actually spent some time to discuss the various options, it's an indication that indeed everybody can see that 138 needs to get some sort of open mind to be either maintained properly or upgraded correctly.
Very good, thank you. Yep.
I wanted to make a point before more comments. Just because this committee ultimately did not come up with a bylaw that worked, the things that were discussed, the ideas that were presented, I know Lorraine was very animate about drive-throughs and looking at drive-throughs and hours of operation. Dan and I were active on that committee. We heard those concerns, and if the planning board, if people here tonight say, yes, we want the planning board to begin working on something, that information is going to be carried with us. That information is going to come forward. It's not going to get lost just because we didn't come up with a bylaw at the time. That's all stuff that was heard and understood and stuff that will be taken into consideration. And what John said about businesses evolving, and what the other John said about a business going in on 138 and meaning more traffic, not necessarily. There's a lot of telecommuting that happens with businesses and high-tech businesses. There are businesses that may go in that don't have more than 2-3 employees who are actually staffed that office. They work remotely with other employees in the field. So just because a business comes in on 138 doesn't mean it's going to add all this traffic and all this congestion. As you said, as I alluded to and John piggybacked on, businesses are changing. It's the 21st century.
And with that, before, and I'll get to you next, we have
Good, thanks, Dan.
Copies. John made copies, and you might want to.
Only about 15, so 15 copies of the land use study, because obviously paper and ink and things like that. So if a handful of people want to take it and maybe coordinate and make copies to spread around to the other people here, I have about 15 copies of the land use study here.
And that was the original, that's the Route 138 corridor study. That's what the $10,000 grant paid for. And that's what the study committee worked from the beginning, and it has everybody's name in it. So that is what I was talking about, the overlay district. That explains the overlay district. It explains how it will work, instead of just saying, okay, let's make it all business. So we do have some copies, like John said.
It's not in color because color's very, very expensive. There's mostly colored things. I will go grab some of my business cards. The Serpent website has this report in color on their website. I will give my business cards. If anyone wants to know how to get access to the Serpent website to access this document with the color graphics, just send me an email, give me a phone call, and I can walk you through it, and you can access it.
That study does have a lot of
Okay, I'll go get
really
some cards.
good technical information that Serpent provided. Yes, ma'am, you had your hand.
Sylvia Cross, Chickering Road. When a house is turned into a business, do they have to have room for a certain amount of parking?
Yes. Depending on what type of business it is, we have formulas that they would have to meet. handicap access, handicap parking spaces. Like with his doctor's office, he was limited to 200 square feet or 2,000, what was it? No, the square footage of how much office space?
2,000.
So 2,000, up to 2,000 square feet. So he would have to have X amount of parking spots to match that. And again, that's where the size of the property will regulate what type of business will go in there. Because if you have a CVS, or if you have a restaurant that has sit-down seating, it's like tripled. So there's the size of the, whatever type of business is gonna go in there, like MD Cabinets. I saw that piece of property years ago. It was for sale. And I think Don Francis brought me over there to see if I could do something with it, and I said, "You gotta be kidding me. What am I gonna do here?" And that is the nicest, he did an awesome job over there. There was wetlands in the back, and just the shape of the parking lot, and, I mean, that's a perfect example of taking a small piece and doing something nice with it. And that's what we would like to see throughout the corridor, and not, if it's just open to general business, you might not have somebody that lives in town who wants to present something really nice. And, we do have design standards, but we also have, we have to approve things that come forward as long as they meet all the criteria.
And we could.
Yes, Richard.
So my question is this, you talked about crafting the overlay, which would take into consideration the various kinds of subtleties that would lead to a business like Rick Smith's. And so my question is, what is the mechanism by which we're going to get that crafted overlay? How do we codify that?
It's an overlay.
No, I mean, how do we codify the nuances that we want to build into the overlay that addresses the concerns, the type of business like Rick's or the type of doctor's business? What's the mechanism by which we get to that crafted, overlay?
Well, I think Lorraine, I'm sorry.
In the overlay district, you specifically put in your use of those. And like Lorraine mentions, who was on the steering committee along with John and several other people here, you make it very specific. No drive-throughs, or drive-throughs only for a CVS or a bank. You put it all in there. So when you vote for the overlay, it's all there right before you. What's going to be in there?
No, I understand that. My question is, is there going to be additional meetings with those people that want their input into this crafted overlay? How are we going to get there?
Well, no, I don't think,
I think we'll
that's
do
not, what this is for tonight is to find out how much support Raynham residents, how much do they want to see Route 138 pointed in the right direction? The planning board, as members, I brought this study to the board one night, and they all just looked at me. Burke's been here one of the longest, and Burke said if I had skin ripped off my back every time I talked about changing zoning on Route 138, that's the fear of spending so much time and working on Route 138. Everybody says volumes are going to change, population's going to change, businesses are going to change, but nobody wants to work together to get something resolved. And in the past, prior to Walmart coming in, probably maybe 10 years ago, planning board, we put together a zoning change that would have prevented Walmart, and it got turned down at the town meeting. 2 years later, a citizen's petition came up to try to stop Walmart. It didn't work. Walmart was already they were already at the threshold of the door. They knew the petition was going to be filed, and all they had to do was come to us, very next planning board meeting, file a Form A plan to change one little lot line, and that grandfathered them in. So we tried in this board when Richard McCarthy was here. Constantly. We used to meet at Gilmore Hall for looking at how can we improve a certain area? How can we help a certain area? I would say since the 138, I don't remember actually sitting down as a planning board and discussing zoning changes for us to initiate. Because every time we initiate, it always comes up as, oh, somebody's got to be behind that. There's a developer that wants to do something over there, or there's this guy that wants to do something. So it's always looked at that we're the ones initiating a zoning change. So when John mentioned having an open forum to discuss it, so people can actually see what we're talking about, that's what's in front of us. So going forward, I think it would be something that would come back to the planning board for this overlay district. I would, if the planning board spends time in reviewing it and comes up with their comments, I think we would probably have something finalized. It could be in a paper, it could be however we could distribute it throughout the town, because again, we can sponsor it, but then it has to go to town meeting. And nobody here wants to go to town meeting and be defeated. That's not what we're doing. That's not why we volunteer our time. We try to come up with ideas that's going to improve the town. And, 138, I built Hillcrest Plaza over 27 years ago. I thought 138 was the next big thing. Holy cow, and it's all this time. And I still feel that if 138 is still going to be the next thing, might not be there for me, but both my kids live in town, and our taxes are not getting any cheaper, and fire department's asking for more help, police department's asking for more help, population's growing. Well, look around. 138 is the last area, and if we don't do it right, we're going to look back.
So one of the points I think you're making, which I think is compelling, is that there's a benefit to everybody that's interested to be proactive in this regard, not to be reactive.
What I told people
Exactly.
what I told people that I spoke with over the summer who live on 138, and they said, "Oh my God, I want to see something happen to my property." I said, "Here's what you have to do. You have to come to our public forums if we have them. We have to come to our public hearings if we have them when a zoning change is proposed. You have to come to town meeting. Any zoning bylaw amendment requires a 2/3 vote of town meeting, not a simple majority, 2/3. Therefore, need to come out. This is your property. This is your town. You need to vocally support what you want to happen with your property."
And the planning board as a whole does not want to support a zoning change to 138 anymore, unless we have support.
Exactly.
Because you're knocking on a door that just doesn't ever open, and you could spend an awful lot of time, and I've spent years so far working on, trying to get this. Yes, Lorraine?
I just wanted to say, I have a couple of exceptions of things that were mentioned, that people don't want to work together, because I certainly have tried to work together. And, I think it was mentioned that, somebody would say, oh, somebody's behind it, and this and that. Well, somebody certainly was behind it, because there were some spot zoning changes, articles that have been presented over the last 25 years. I've been doing this just like you, Dan. You're passionate about it, I'm passionate about it. And so there were people behind these things before. There certainly were. We're not making this up. There was. They had petitions. They presented these articles.
Oh, I don't. Right. I don't. And that's just.
Guy for who was going to attend to it. So
right.
It was personal. And but I just wanted. What I really want to say here is now to let me digest what you're doing here tonight. And I'm correct in saying that you are not going to do a zoning change. Your goal is not going to not do a zoning change to Route 138, but to instead implement like a Route 138 overlay district. And if no one comes before your board to...
Can you hold it?
Okay. If no one comes before your board to participate in the overlay district that we create, or you create, or whatever, then it will just revert back to its zone of like, you know, residential DNR area, or whatever the other zone is up further than 138.
Exactly. The current zoning on Route 138 will always stay the same if there's an overlay district.
So residential B will be residential B
So,
with an overlay.
exactly. And that's the-
Further will be like we're telling the Cedar where
Exactly.
was that zone, but say that will be that, like whatever.
And that's the
zone is.
advantage of having the overlay district. Instead of keep
Well, I
changing the
understand, but I
zone.
wanna make sure that everybody here gets that.
Yes.
too. Okay.
Yes.
Just one final question for me. I know this is not a large sample of the town, but what is your sense of the group that's here?
Well,
People
that's-
looking for change or not looking for?
That's what I was gonna ask the chairman if he wanted to do.
What's your sense of what this group's opinion is?
I think showing that
Show of hands?
showing that the amount of people that are here, I think there's a lot of concern for Route 138. Whether it's financial concern, whether it's traffic concerns, there's a lot of people that are here for a reason, because something's gotta happen to Route 138.
Or nothing's gonna happen?
Or nothing's gonna happen to Route 138.
That's what I'm trying
So,
to get at. What's your sense of the town? If this is the representation of the town, and maybe it's the second meeting, there'll be twice as many people, or a different 32 people, or whatever, what's your sense of what the town wants? I don't know if you do it by a show of hands, a nodding of head, a dancing in the chair, but
well,
what's your sense?
I don't think that's fair. It's not fair for the people that are in front of us, because the reason why I say it's not fair, I could ask everybody, raise your hand if you're in favor of Route 138 zone overlay district. And it would be kind of immature, because nobody's read what the overlay district would even consist of. So I would say hold that thought. Let the planning board work on the overlay district, which we have a copy here that was done and spent over 2 years preparing. Let the planning board review that and work with that overlay district. And if there's any changes that the board members have to that, then we'll make our changes and we will come up with what we would consider. I would suggest we had another meeting like this. Then I would ask for a show of hands after everybody had a chance to read that. Because that would be something that now we have information in front of us, legit information that you read, and you're telling me that my idea wasn't always right. And let me tell you, it happens a lot. We don't agree on everything up here, and that's the best part. So that's what I would, I wouldn't raise my hand, because unless the final result is in writing.
Well, and I just took you on your word, you said you didn't want to go forward with another proposal for a zoning change if it wasn't backed by the town.
Exactly.
And I don't know what the numbers are, because most of the people here I know, a lot of them I don't know. If 75% of this group wanted you to leave things alone, would you go forward with that? Doing what you just talked about?
Who wants to leave things exactly the way they are? All right, so that in itself tells me that I think it's time the planning board works on the.
And I ask you one thing, I know that you stated there were 101, I believe you said, properties.
104, yeah.
104 properties
Yeah.
on 138. Just keep in mind that 104 properties is just a small portion of the people that are involved, are affected by your change.
Well, that's why I-
Absolutely,
Let
yeah.
me finish my statement. There are literally thousands of families in the abutting neighborhoods that would be affected by whatever changes you made. That's all I ask you to do, is keep that and take that.
And that's why we put it in the paper, because we want those, this is a town issue. Whether it's abutting, whether it's Judson Street, it is, it's a town issue. And it may not affect us, like we said, 5 years down the road, but it will affect the town 10 years down the road, and 15 years down the road.
Just quickly, Dan, I read the article in the call that Mark did, and I'm glad that when I talked to Mr. Shivo about inviting the selectmen to this meeting tonight, one thing he emphasized and one thing that I made sure was in the article when I talked to Mr. LaRock was we encouraged people from the neighborhoods abutting Route 138 to come to this and to be involved in the process, because we didn't want them left out in the cold. And that's why I mentioned that the issues that yourself and Lorraine, who are on that steering committee throughout its tenure, the comments that you made and the concerns that were expressed are not falling on deaf ears.
And those are all in that,
Yep.
that's the original study.
Yep.
And really, as you go through, we talked about, we did the steering committee, and as we went through all the details and so forth, what we came up with was very similar to what we have now. And that is, and to address your point, John, your type of business, and Tony's points as well, the only type of businesses that could go there are, as Tony said, based on lot size, would be doctors and hairdressers and so forth. And that's what we're zoned for now. There's no need,
But that's only in that one middle area. And that's not through.
And again, as I told you, that's my main concern, because
Yep.
that's where the thousands of residents live, in that area. Sure, there's a couple of houses maybe beyond that, north of that. I don't think there's any, there might be a couple south as well. But that's the main area that I'm concerned with. That's the one where the biggest impact will be felt. Because if the traffic gets out of, grossly out of hand with all these different businesses and so forth, it's that neighborhood. It's the Britton Streets, the King Phillips, the First Streets, the Chickrings and so forth. Those are the streets, the neighborhoods that'll feel the impact. And you can't put a traffic light at every one of those. Okay, and you have to acknowledge the fact that traffic on 138 is an issue. If it wasn't an issue, you wouldn't have put in a traffic light at King Philip, you wouldn't be planning one at Center Street, and you wouldn't have a police officer at Center Street
I don't
every day.
believe I ever said it wasn't an issue.
No,
Didn't I
I'm
say
just
that
saying,
it has increased significantly?
It's a major issue.
What's that? 10%?
Yes, Burke.
Yeah.
5 years with Walmart? That's not a lot.
John, we have 53 residential properties. If every one of them changed to business, and each one of them had 5 people working, we're like at 250 people, and we have how many cars per day now?
20-some
Be-
thousand.
Anywhere from 19.2 to 23,500.
I just don't see it as a huge change.
But Burke, you're looking at the number of employees. How about the number of people who frequent the businesses? That's what I'm concerned about. Not the people, those people are the least of the problem. They'll go in the morning and they won't leave again until 5 at night. How about all the people during the day that are gonna go in and out of there, depending on what kind of business you put in there?
And that's the key, what kind of
That's
business?
the issue, that's the issue for me.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, but if it's a small type of computer, work out of your house computer thing, the zoning covers that now. It's covered now. And again, I gotta stress, we keep saying, businesses and businesses. The world isn't beating down the door to put a business there. He just told you, he put his 3 lots up for sale, he didn't get any bites at all. There are 2 properties that I know of now that have huge signs on them, that they're for lease or for sale, or they'll do anything you want.
I think you have,
Nobody's
this
fighting them.
gentleman is telling you, I mean, he's a clear example of why businesses aren't going there. He tried. We had another gentleman who bought a piece of property who wants to fix it up, and he has issues. The first thing people are gonna do when they wanna buy a business is go to the town and look up the zoning and figure it out. Well, Route 138, the way it's zoned, it's messed up. From start to finish, it's messed up.
And I think
It doesn't fit
I think-
today's economy.
I think you're overstating the businesses that are allowed in that residential D district. First, John, please. First, they're only allowed by special permit, which means the public hearing and all that stuff, which site plan review would still require a public hearing. However, be that as it may, there are only a small list of businesses that are allowed by special permit, such as antique shops and craft stores. The type of business that John Kokorayanis mentioned, the type of computer high-tech, is not necessarily allowed in that residential D district, so we'd have to look at that to make sure we expand it enough for what's appropriate for the corridor.
Okay, a couple more questions, and then we can all, yes, Lorraine?
I just want to say that 138 is not only just a problem for Raynham. I mean, Somerset, Dayton, Taunton, Raynham, Easton, Stoughton, Canton, all of 138 is all mixed residential business. Every single town that
Right.
has 138 Monthly has the same problem. And I don't see any of them coming to any great conclusion, so I just.
Well, I bet you find out if any of them had an open meeting like this, and this is probably one of a kind. I think Raynham people, we step forward. I'm not afraid to say how I feel. That's why I'm sitting here. I really don't. If I feel strong about something, it's not because I'm getting paid or anything else. It's because I went to school in this building. I give my time back to Raynham because I love Raynham. And I really feel if we don't do something on Route 138, we could have negative businesses that we don't want. So let's take the time that it's going to take to work together to see what's going to be the best.
John Texera and I
Yep.
We're all passionate about this.
Exactly. So, yes, one last question.
What were the dates of the traffic study? Like, what were the months that started?
It was 3 days, September 9th to the 12th, and when they do a traffic count, they, I'm sorry.
Can I have your name and address?
Oh, sure, Janelle Hill, 68 Britton Circle.
When they do, having actually put out traffic tubes in a prior life and collected the data, we tend to stay away, we tend to do it in the middle of the week. We stay away from weekends, we stay away from holidays because we want to get a true sense of the daily traffic. So September 9th through the 12th, which I believe was probably a Tuesday through a Thursday, which is when the traffic counts are usually
Was
done.
Market Basket shut down at that time?
Yeah, they weren't, I don't think they were in operation.
Walmart was just kind of newly opened and Market Basket was shut down.
Well, I don't think Walmart's business has picked up much since then, from what I understand.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yes, we'll have one more. You have,
Just one sentence.
Yeah.
Raynham is very
Excuse
special
me.
because our 138 cuts through the exit of 495.
Right.
So it's very special from the other town division.
Right, but can't you go right up to 95?
yes.
That piece of 138, take after the doctor here, is not 138 that we have on the other side of Taunton, or the one that actually connects down to Providence. It's very specific, given the geodemographic location of that corridor, and always is going to incorporate traffic, because that's where the flow of things are going. People driving to Taunton. On the other side of 138, there's no big town like Taunton. And there is a reason why Walmart opened here after, and they fought to open here, because that way they can have all the customers they were losing on the other store they have, and they're losing from Mansfield, Norton, and North Attleboro, and locations like that. So this piece of 138 is very specific. It's not the same like on the other side of 495 towards Easton. It's not the same on the other side of Taunton.
Very
So-
good. All right, is there anybody new that has not had a chance to say their piece? Yes, sir.
Steve McDonald, 508 Broadway. My question, or maybe, I don't know a lot about the South Coast Rail and how it may affect the zoning on 138, but I read an article before this past election that Deval Patrick granted $250 million to the beginning of the exploratory, development of the South Coast Rail. And, I mean, there's a lot of concern about traffic on 138, but if I drive around being in construction and engineering my whole life, that South Coast Rail is going to dissect Britton Street.
Yes.
Then knock out 5 residences at the end of Britton Street, or dissect those. It's going to run across King Philip Street, right? Correct? And dissect a few houses there, and I think it runs right behind Chickering.
Right
behind.
behind
Now,
the end of
those
First
road
Street.
crossings that this
Right in my
train
backyard,
will make,
practically.
I mean, will make, right? This is probably going to happen. Now, are those gonna be lighted road crossings, or are they just gonna be?
That's
I mean,
yeah,
because,
we're not,
I mean, the big concern of traffic and noise and lighting and all this, that train crosses a road and it pulls its horn, right? How many times a day does that
Yeah.
happen?
The
right?
estimate is
I mean,
35 trains a day.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, if we don't start looking at, like, my property, I own 2 pieces of property on 138. I own a pretty substantial part, because if you look at the topography of 138, I think I'm the top of the hill. If you look at the topography, 508 and 496 Broadway are the top of the hill. If we don't, I have a deep, 408 feet deep piece of property. My property abuts Donnie Francis' 3 pieces of property. If something's not done, huh? Right next to the old BB Goods. I built the house.
All right, this isn't, let's keep it.
Yeah, but, I mean, if we don't, the way I look at it is, if we don't do something about the development with the train coming through, it's gonna, I mean, essentially, it's gonna happen either way. So, I mean, the forming a committee and having people, have their insight is understandable, but it seems like there's a lot of concern about, my house back here or this house back here, when it's really, the concern is the properties on 138. I mean, we're not talking about, the other side of Britton Street and backing into those properties over there. And there's plenty of land, I mean, in my section anyways, that there's plenty of land for screening. I mean, I have a high, you don't even see my house from Britton Street, because my topography, is pretty good. I have a pretty high, dry piece of land, so, I mean, you know, I'm all for some kind of development of 138, for sure. I didn't invest my money into those two pieces of property thinking that I was going to lose money down the road.
I understand.
And I
I
spent a
understand
lot
your
of money,
position.
so.
Very
know,
good.
yeah.
Thank you.
Anyways.
Is there any way, if we're gonna have, other meetings, and I know you said that, well, I don't know exactly what you said about having all the time,
Well-
when you're discussing it, but I just want to know, is there any way that we can, the people that signed in tonight could be made aware of when the planning board's gonna be discussing this stuff?
Well, what we, like I said, mentioned earlier, what we'll do is, the planning board, John will set up some times for the board to review this overlay district that you've seen for, you were part of it, so it's the exact same one. And once the planning board comes up with their final version, if they have any changes, or that's the final version, then I think we will do this one more time, just to let everybody know, this is what it is. There's a copy at the town planning office. Everybody can receive a,
Probably put it
can
on the
get it.
website.
And then it will go to the town meeting. And
Yes.
I'm listening to what you're saying.
no, you're gonna have input. You're gonna see what our final version is. Our final version as a planning board. And if we have people that are saying, well, I think that this should be adjusted or changed, we will take that and look at that and see how that fits in. And then at that point, we're gonna go forward with something. All right? Yes, sir, you're a new one. You had your hand up.
Yes, Mark Thomas, Maple Street in Raynham.
Yes.
I recognize that we have the traffic study performed, but one thing I just want to raise to attention is that the traffic study is not taking into consideration the assisted living building that's being built on 138, or right off of 138. And it's also not taking into consideration the huge apartment complex in Bridgewater that's being built, where we're going to have an influx of traffic coming from that complex.
What traffic study?
No, your traffic count. He's saying that didn't take that into consideration.
But it's unknown, excuse me, it's unknown how much that development in Bridgewater is actually gonna affect this section of Route 138. It will definitely affect the northern section of 138 because, excuse me,
Yeah.
excuse me, please.
Hey, please, he's trying to talk.
It will definitely affect, what's it, Elm Street, between 138 and 104, that will definitely be impacted. And that will definitely be used as a cut-through between Route 24 and Route 495. How much it will affect this section of 138, I really think will be fairly negligible. And as far as the assisted living facility,
Just because we do have Walmart, we do have Market Basket, that influx of people that live there are gonna be looking to do their shopping.
okay.
Very good. Yes, ma'am, you were new. Yes.
Sort of just brought it up, but my question was, you see all the traffic on 104 coming over 24 now, going to the center of Raynham, okay? They're not even filled. They were worried about the apartments that were built there that are in Raynham. We've had no problem. But these are 5-story buildings. They're huge. There's a clubhouse in the middle of it. Where are they all gonna go? How are they gonna get on 495? How are they gonna get on 24? How are they gonna go to Market Basket or Walmart, which actually is not a problem because the Don store doesn't do anything. They're disappointed in what it does. Thank you, Lord. But-
Well, I think there's, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to work with what we know.
Well, Rain invited me to this meeting, and
Oh, I'm glad she did.
what's going on, so I don't know actually what the meeting is about, so I gotta go back to the beginning. But when they brought up the 104, that I do know, because I watch it being built every day, and I know it's gonna impact me. And
Very
I
good.
didn't see anybody say anything about being worried about how we're gonna be impacted. We've got mobile, we've got test stations, we've got everything over there. Now we have apartment buildings. I saw anybody that's gonna be impacted by whatever's going on, which unfortunately I don't exactly know, because Lorraine didn't.
Well, what's going on is we're trying to think ahead and plan for exactly what you're talking about, plan for traffic. If Walmart didn't go in, we wouldn't have 3 sets of lights that little businesses cannot afford the planning board and the town cannot go make little businesses pay the millions of dollars that they have paid to get all of the improvements on 138. So that's what we're doing.
Can I
We're
have your
trying
name and
to.
address, please? You. Can I have your name and address?
Janine Castro, 27 Scott Drive.
Thank you.
Very good. Somebody had their newcomer. Okay, we still have some things on our agenda to do for this evening, and I do appreciate everybody coming out. I hope it was informative for everybody. And we will look for an ad in the paper because we'll have another one out there. Very good, thank you. We're going to take a 5-minute recess.
Recess, we play kickball?
We're going to take a 5-minute recess till everybody clears out. I'm sweating. We're all set over there? Okay, thank you. Have a good night. So, next on our agenda, we have minutes.
I move that we waive the reading and approve the minutes of October 16, 2014, October 28, 2014, and November 6, 2014.
Second. Those are all set. Motion was made. All in favor? Aye. And what else do we have?
Invoices got passed down.
Invoices are down. We have December 4th. We have a full house.
Yeah.
A lot of,
I want to be sick that night, I think.
all right.
Okay, Maureen, no.
There's just security, there's a few things on it that we'll make sure that we move that one along. Was Henry here for the highway department?
No.
Henry, can I just let you, I want to fill you in on this, only because now that the planning board has funds in our control, Finch Farms, Steeplechase, there was funds that we got the developer to change, he changed the wording, you approved, we all approved it. What came in front of us was our highway department. If you look at the picture, he's requesting
This is 15 Church,
Lanage Street there.
which is what the money was originally for
Exactly,
anyways, if you
exactly.
recall.
So, we approved 8150 for that.
Was this earlier tonight?
Yes, so I just wanted to let you know that, because I want everybody to know where these funds are being spent as they're being spent.
Oh, 70.
A few hundred thousand.
Almost 5.
Almost 500?
We're over 4.
So, the other thing I did too, is because of the size of the money, and it is being put on planning board, it's in the direction of the planning board, John, I had him, and I hate to go through his papers, but if he's not gonna be here, I had him prepare the next time that these things come in. This is how we're gonna handle the funds, so it can always be accounted for. We have to sign the applicant, meaning it could be highway, could be park and rec, could be anybody that is requesting funds. It's gonna be the discretion of the planning board, but Maureen's gonna have an ongoing tally. It's too much money just to nonchalantly
And do we have
approve.
checks and balances to make sure that money only goes where we directed?
It's, yes.
And nowhere else?
Yes, Maureen,
And who actually signs the checks? The city treasurer, town treasurer?
yes, we have to sign this. Randy's gonna get a copy of it.
Yeah.
Town accountant will get a copy of it. And then Maureen will take care of following through with the clerical, getting the bill paid, just like we normally do.
And who actually gets the check from our money?
The person that,
No, who actually takes the money out of the account?
The town accountant, he's gonna
Okay.
write the check.
The board will have to sign a voucher every time you
Right.
spend money.
Yep. So we have enough, whether it's us 5 or the next 5, that money is gonna be there, and it's always gonna be accounted for by, everybody has to sign for it and approve it.
And the Board of Selectmen's okay with this?
Yeah, I worked with them on getting the funds transferred to us, and we still have some more accounts that I'm working on.
And are they gonna submit anything if they want?
They could.
Okay.
If there's, because if a homeowner in town has an issue, like we did at the Hill Street culvert,
Yeah.
I remember a few years ago, you know, we didn't have funds, at least we didn't, and I don't know how they got the money, but they had to fix that. So things like that are problems, then,
And does the different boards in the town of Raynham aware that we have this money and it's for town use?
not yet.
Are they going to be made aware? Oh, they know from watching this meeting.
I'm sure,
And if they haven't watched the meeting, then
I'm
they should have
sure-
watched the meeting, right?
Yeah, I'm sure,
Word will get out?
yeah, because the selectmen are aware of it, so if somebody needs funds for something,
But I hope that the funds are primarily to do things that the planning board is involved with, fixing roads and culverts and drainage. Not,
That's
whatever.
exactly why I want, that's exactly why I want to have a form that has to be filled out and come to us and to be approved by the planning board, because it's
And
not.
will we do these approvals at a public hearing, correct?
Yes, oh yeah, no, definitely. I'm sorry, I scrambled, I was looking for that.
No, I don't think this would require a public hearing.
No, he said at a public hearing.
Meeting, thank you,
Public
okay,
meeting.
good. I thought you said public hearing.
So-
Just so the town knows what we're doing.
Yes, exactly. And Maureen is gonna have, so if anybody, you know, if anybody at all says how much money is left in that account, it's not, she's not gonna have to go spend time, you know, researching.
We'll put this on planning board letterhead and have copies.
So tonight, John had worked that up, so this one here, the 8150, I just had asked him to put together and
Would
give
you
us
like
a
me to have
guesstimate.
go and just fill out one of these forms? Because he's already given us the information. I'm gonna see him on
You
Monday.
might as well, and then the
That
next
way we have
meeting,
a track
And then
from
the next meeting, you
beginning
guys
to
can
end.
we
sign
can
it.
sign
Okay.
it, and right for the very first deduction, we have proof.
He's already given us all the
Yeah.
supporting
Now
information,
do
just
it,
has to
and then
fill out
bring
the
it in
form.
on the next meeting.
Excellent, okay.
Anything
You can just
else?
put see attached letter.
Did I
attached
miss anything,
letter,
Maureen?
too.
No, I can't think of anything else.
Russ, Burke? Okay, meeting adjourned, thank you very much.
Thank you.